This limited Kintsugi Heroes podcast series was made possible through grant funding provided by the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice Connecting Seniors Grant Program. If you'd like to find out more about Kintsugi Heroes, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au. Welcome to our Kintsugi Heroes special series, Connecting Seniors, where we share the experiences of ageing Australians to create connections across our communities. In this episode, John Millam had a chat with Walter Frankel, a dedicated mental health advocate and senior support volunteer. Hailing from a background marked by deep historical trauma, Walter has turned his personal experiences into a mission to foster connection, empathy, and meaningful conversations among mature age individuals. Now, let's get to the conversation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes podcast. And today it's a great privilege to be talking to someone in our Connecting Seniors series. And today we introduce the challenging, self-described challenging Walter Frankel. Walter, welcome to Kintsugi Heroes Connecting Seniors. So good to have you on board today.
Thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. I think everybody's story has has the gold in it. That's where we get to touch our own story through the words of others and the experiences of others. So fantastic to have you here today. And in terms of bio, Walter, as mentioned, I love to hear an introduction from your own perspective. So I'm going to ask you to tell the listeners today who Walter Frankel is.
He's a very complex individual. That I can tell you. But to start at the very beginning, I am a child of Holocaust survivors. I was born in Zimbabwe, which was Rhodesia, grew up there.
Wow.
Then went at 16. I now worked out why we left at 16, because obviously my parents didn't want me to serve in the Rhodesian army. So we went to Cape Town, which was the only place my father would go to, although my mother suggested we go overseas somewhere else.
Right.
He said, no. And my mother was a very wise woman. She turned around to my dad and said, "That's fine, Martin. If you want to go, we'll go. But just understand that in about 20 years' time, South Africa is not going to be the same place you see it as now." We left in 69.
Wow.
And 1989 is when the change and Nelson Mandela came part.
Yeah.
And so very much aware of who I am and the conditions. And whilst I think my parents were kind and caring to the indigenous people, we weren't. I know that. In about 59, we experienced the Belgian Congolese refugees coming down. And around about the same time in 65, I had a school teacher who went to Australia.
Right.
Holiday. That inspired me from that point. I decided, and I did my little bit of research. I said, no, that's where I'm going to go live. I was 12 years old at that time. I knew I was coming to Australia. I just had to find my meal ticket. And in 1984, I achieved my meal ticket. I was, as I call it, deported from South Africa as part of a team to set up a project in Brisbane, which was called the Pick and Pay Hypermall. Massive retail organization in South Africa. Didn't make it in Australia.
Right.
It tried twice and failed twice.
Right.
But that is because they had the wrong attitude, in my opinion, to how to deal and do business in Australia. They didn't have the concept that they are nobody here and they have to become somebody. So that's the journey. And then in 84, I got to Brisbane. And I thank a family, I won't mention the name, in Melbourne, who actually paid for my sponsorship here. They were partners in the venture. Within 24 hours of all the bits and pieces, they organized me a permanent residency. Said, these people are not coming here as workers who are going back in 3 years' time. So I'm indebted to that family eternally.
Right. So your mother was a natural social researcher, and she understood the nature of change. And did that inspire you? Is like your future?
Well, I should have taken on a lot of things on the road and remembered and watched it and taken action. But like all we go through young and we think we know everything and do everything. So yeah, I've made my fair share of mistakes, not read the road signs properly. Nonetheless, that's how I got here. And about 5 years ago now, I decided that I could not tolerate the dysfunctionality, toxicity of my family, and I moved out.
Wow.
I had a significant mental breakdown over the years.
Right.
Some of it is being induced by some of the psychotic drugs that doctors give you. I promise you, they don't tell you the side effects.
Yeah.
And I had great difficulty in connecting with the medical profession, particularly psychiatrists and psychologists. And when I apply my knowledge of education, they don't know how to communicate those people. Because the art of communication is the art of connection. You've got to know how to connect to the individual. It's not the individual connecting with you. If you're the professional, you've got to connect with them.
Yeah.
And so I started to learn about mental health. And I've done, it goes into pages. And when I say literary pages of research, learning, reading about mental health. And I've qualified myself as a mental health first aider, suicide prevention, which is obviously offered in service to people in personal capacity, in a group, discussion groups, and that. So I've become passionate about something I knew nothing about, but I knew I had to because the doctors were just screwing with my head, to be honest.
Yeah. Walter, just interesting. So have you read Viktor Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning?
5 years ago. I've always known about Viktor Frankl. 5 years ago in COVID, I got the book, I got the audio, and I read it. I've got to tell you, it's quite difficult reading.
Yeah. It's an amazing story, and I wonder, as a child of like Viktor Frankel's story, obviously, his experience in concentration camps in Germany framed the rest of his life.
Frames all of our lives.
Yeah. So how, as a child of Holocaust survivors, how do you think that was something that played into your world? You mentioned that you split from your family. So
look, I have, again, it's because I read to find out, to understand.
Yeah.
And it took me till COVID to understand that I have also generational trauma.
Yeah.
Passed down through my parents' genes for what they had to go through. And how did I work it out? I decided during COVID to listen to a tape that my mother did in Sydney to the university here as a survivor. Now, I'd had that since 1992, I think, if I'm right, in my folders, but I never wanted to listen to it because hearing the voice is quite... And therein, I said, oh my God, here my mother had the same nightmare dreams that I had as a child. And she never said to me they were the same.
No.
Actually had the same. They hid things from us. So yeah, it does affect you. It does affect your thinking. It affects your way you deal with people. I think I'm a better person for what they had to endure because I have got a social bend in me. I don't have the drive of money is all, and so I'm not a narcissistic tendency person. I'm there to help people. I'm there to do things. I work to do my best, and I don't say yes to. I'm no yes man to anybody, which doesn't help sometimes in corporate life.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're right and they discover it, and then they have to deal with you.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's always a challenge, right? So I'm interested in how do you think your parents managed? Like, obviously they moved from South Africa and to Australia, and there was a lot of
No, they've spent a life effectively, you can say, on the run. They've never settled.
Yeah, wow.
And there's always been someone in their lives that have helped and portrayed. I could start with during the war. My mom was in Holland. She was Dutch. There was a Dutch resistance couple that were ultimately the savior of my mother through the war.
Right.
Unfortunately, they did not manage to save her mother, brother, and sister, who were taken to Sobibor concentration camp. And there's a story within there. I have met the couple on numerous occasions through my life. So my mother was always on alert. She spent her life on alert. So that's what she did. On the other hand, my father was in Dachau concentration camp, picked up on Kristallnacht, and effectively my mom used to say, Dad died in the camp. He just now lives to be able to survive. He never talked, not a word. My mother would tell us sporadic things. My father, it was sealed, never to be talked about. So fortunately, they've traveled around. So from South Africa, when we went to Australia, my wife and myself and children, eventually my parents went to join my sister, who went to Israel.
Right.
And that was a bit of a shock to my father's system. He couldn't stand it because he couldn't communicate. He didn't know the language. And they were going to go back to South Africa. And I said, no, I've got some money at the moment. And I put a deposit down on a retirement village little unit.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I now live in those units myself. And unfortunately, Dad only lasted 18 months here before his heart gave in. And then my mom said, I'm going to go visit Judith, my sister. And I knew at that point she's not coming back.
Yeah.
She did come back for a few visits. Yeah. But the relationship between my sister and my mother with my wife wasn't quite, there was a lot of jealousy on my side of it. Anyway, so yeah, my mom's always been on alert. You would see her sitting on a chair and she's sitting ready to run. She's not sitting to be comfortable with that. She was a mental health nurse, by the way.
Wow. Well, lived experience drives passion, doesn't it? So, and in some ways, you mentioned your experience, you just self-described as as I do, as complicated, right? So how do you think your experiences with your family and your perhaps the generational element of their experience passing to you, how did that shape your future?
It very much did with relationship between myself and my sister. There is absolute trust. There is no bias. There is no criticism necessary. There is criticism, but it's meant not in the sense of hurting somebody. We believe in each other. We were brought up to know that we were the only things that work together in this world.
Right.
We are there to support each other through to the end. To the extent that when my mother passed away, her will was slightly messed up because the old girl didn't get things right and circumstances didn't update them. And so they had trouble processing the will. So I said, look, do me a favor. Give me the pieces of paper. I sign it all over to you. You finish it off. It doesn't matter. I don't want the money. You had the lion's share of taking care. So she finished it up. And then she said, I've opened up 2 bank accounts. One is in my name for you, and one is in my name for me. I've cut it down half and half. To this day, I do not know how much money she got or how she does it, but she has absolute discretion. If she or her children need something, they get it. We are just like we are strong since childhood, and in fact, I'm going to surprise her in 2 weeks' time to pitch up for her granddaughter, one of her granddaughter's weddings. She doesn't get that I'm coming.
Wow.
I'm just going to rock up to the front door.
That'd be wonderful. And that's in Israel. So
that's in Israel, yeah. And it's one of these ultra-religious groups her daughter lives in amongst.
Wow.
And the kids. The 2 others are normal, but they triplets, my sister's daughters. So it'll be an interesting blend of cultures.
Wow, it's a fascinating adventure at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah, well, enjoy the wedding. That's a lovely gesture. How did that relationship with your family, the complexities that, past trauma bring into that, how did that inspire your relations? You mentioned you you your you and your wife and children migrated to Australia. Yeah. So how was that process? And, what did your background
Australia
mean for your family?
the coming to Australia was not a problem. The settling into Australia was not a problem. The problems that I occurred was the dysfunctionality of my family to one another and the value system ultimately that we had. We went through the scapegoats, we blaming somebody else, you name it, we did it. That had a profound effect because for me, I was brought up that family is unconditional. And on my wife's side, that didn't appear to be the same. And over the years, I saw the road signs, but I did not read them or take heed of them. It took me 48 years to come to realization of what damage it had done to me as a person.
Yeah.
And trying to change my belief system, my value system, and I allowed people to overstep my boundaries.
So what did that realization do in your life?
It caused me a lot of trauma because I didn't speak up. I let it happen. Anything to have peace and quiet.
Yeah.
So you could technically say I was passive aggressive. In other words, and I think I got that from my father.
Right. Yeah. Well, he was, yeah, like, well, it's
He's even called either.
no, it's an important influence, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
frame, you understand relationships in the context of the people who taught you first often. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what he did teach me in the last 5 years in particular is how to help people and not label people.
Right.
Yes, I put a label to a person in my head, but I don't tell them you are that because that is very hurtful.
Mm.
Can cause more damage than it can cause good.
Yeah.
But what it does allow me, because negotiation is one of my strengths and things that I've done in my life,
Mm.
it gives me the ability to read you and understand you.
Mm.
And therefore, I can expect your behavior before you even have to tell me something.
Yeah.
And I've got many examples in that area where I've used it.
Just to take up a little bit more time with, you mentioned 48 years, right? Of getting to a point where something changed. So how do you feel about like the whole journey of family, right? So your relationship with your wife, you mentioned was problematic at times. Like, I'm sure all relationships have the ups and
All
downs.
relationships are
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, and of course, your children are all part of it. How did that play out for you?
I stand here today with my only living relative that I have absolute contact is my sister. I don't have contact with my wife. I don't have contact with my children. They don't have contact with each other. It is really a great tragedy because that's not how I was raised and
Yeah.
not part of my belief system. But I also know that it's beyond my control,
Mm.
number one. And number two is my only fear now is if one of them arrive at my front door, am I able to accept an apology or start again? And that is simply my biggest fear.
How do you respond to that? Like at the point where all of that starts to play out and things break down, that's a very tough position for anybody to be in. For a man who, particularly with a history of sort of of parents and sort of practice of holding things back. How did you cope with that situation where the social fabric, the support and process, your intimate relationships were breaking down?
Look, from a commercial business point of view, I actually had some fantastic people who were, I won't say mentors, but they had a significant influence in helping me. And basically, I threw myself into my work
Yeah.
because I had to make a living and I couldn't cope with both sides of the ledger. And keeping a job was the important thing. When I got to retirement, I decided, no, I can't do this anymore. And, I was actually quite mentally ill. I was hospitalized. And I started to see things from a different lens.
Mm.
And I started to see things what I didn't like within my family, some of their attitudes and their values. And money is a big one. I don't care about money. Money is just there to provide. And yet on my side of the family there, that's all they thought about is, where's the money? Bring me some more money. Give me this, do this. I need that. I didn't like that. I'm not saying I'm a capitalist. I'm a quasi-capitalist because I believe in the capitalist system, but I am a socialist in terms of how capitalism should do. So I'm quite at odds with various governments because I believe in helping people. And my family didn't seem to see that. Now, in saying that, my sister's a socialist. She lives on a kibbutz. That's socialism. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
They have tremendous problems having to deal with it because it's committees on committees who decide things go. So that part I couldn't do. I'm an autocrat from that point.
Well, it's idolizing any kind of system is like a recipe for being hit by its problems, right? So,
You've got to be prepared to change.
Yeah, and you have changed, right? Like the journey from your working and professional life and family life through challenging your mental health, right, and having to deal with that. How, as a man with a professional track record and success, and being able to to handle lots of difficult transitions in your life, how did you feel about suddenly being part of the system?
Okay. Look, from a young age, my mother taught my sister and myself life changes. And she made very certain that through various points, she had changed things in our lives, typically for the better in her viewpoint, not necessarily in ours at the time.
Yeah.
But she was significant in acknowledging the life of change. So we grew up with that in our minds. It wasn't something we contested. Most people don't like change because it's disruptive, it's unpleasant, you have to give up something, whatever. So I've always been able to adapt to change. That's why I came to Australia, because the social structure, the society here suited my viewpoint. It wasn't the same, but it was closely the only place in the world that was similar, and it was the furthest place from everywhere at the time. But so I've always acknowledged change where other people don't wish to change. And they believe they're right at all cost.
But it's a big change to go from a working life and family to end up being in a position where you are you're relying on people helping you through what is a challenging time for a man to realize that he needs to be helped at that point.
Look, I have been throughout my life, I've not had a big range of friendships because I have trust issues, but I've always come across, and from, I don't know whether you call right field, left field, I get confused. But there's always somebody that enters my life at a certain point when I'm in need and helps me, or guides me, or gives to me. And so I don't fear, because I know that it's going to be there, and that I'm capable. And of course, I think I'm reasonably educated. I wouldn't like to overestimate, but I know how to navigate and negotiate my way through.
Right.
So that saves me. And people have learned, don't try to negotiate with Walter. He will beat you at the game, simply because I know how to remove myself from the negotiation in terms of the emotional side. And I know how to research and find things that I've even beaten lawyers at their own game, just because I'm just one step ahead of them. I think it through. Right. And that's what I try to give people now, some of that experience. Don't just stop and say, no, this is no good. I'm going to, said, forget it. You've got to think differently. You've got to take a different approach to the way you have a conversation, the way you see things.
So is it that value? Is it that capacity that has helped you, move on, like into recovery and into, a second stage?
Yes, it is, because I tend to meet people. As I say, I've only got a small circle of people in my life, but across the world. And they all came to me left field. They weren't supposed to be there, but they came in. And because we had a personal connection and we'd had those conversations, we didn't judge each other. They stretched their arm out and lift, which is what I do to others now. I just stretch my arm out. If you want it, I'm there. And I don't invade their space. I leave myself side by side with them as I walk them through. And I have had to learn to listen as opposed to speak.
So there's a lot of life skills that you're sharing that, hinting at are important for the listeners to know. So that's really like you were mentioning earlier, how you help people. That's a theme now. So what about like now you do support and training and community work. So what about that is important to you now, and why does that seem to work to keep you moving forward?
Okay, because people need help. Not everybody is self-sufficient. Not everybody is academically qualified or emotionally qualified to handle things. And my attitude is, if I can support you and help you, I will do it. I won't ask you for money. All I ask you is, I will respect you, you respect me. We may not have similar agreements in terms of values or political or religious convictions, but as long as you are legal, which we have chosen to live in, that's okay. When you move across the line and you go into the illegalities, no, I'll walk away. I won't get involved. I won't be pressurized any longer in my life to deal in the area of gray. And I have been there.
Yeah. So what is that? You talk about, sort of setting up into areas that, are supporting people rather than sort of, impacting or abusing people. So what does that involve now? What can you do as a person with lived experience? What can you do moving forward to help the community?
I have one conversation at a time. I talk to anybody and everybody. I don't care who you are. I respect you as a human being. And I like to listen to other people's stories. I've learned a terrific amount through lived experience of what other people have told me. It's formed my view of this world. And I've got to be honest, at this moment in time, my view of this world is unbelievably blurry because I don't like what I'm seeing of man's inhumanity to man under the guise of religion, corporatization. I just find it distasteful and it's unnecessary. And, there's just too much suffering at the hands of people who are very, very wrong in how they do things.
So as a person who's gone through a journey and understands that truth now for you, that's the truth you understand is true. Yeah. And it's a truth that, is focused on the well-being of the world. How do you believe you can make a difference and others like you can make a difference to the world so that truth is actually more
Okay, so the one is
prevalent?
the first thing is you have to want to give back. If you don't want to give back to society, you've got the biggest problem to overcome.
Right.
The other thing is the only way I can give back is to use my lived experience, my academic knowledge, and my thirst, which has always been there. I love information. I don't read books for its storytelling purposes. I read information, and the web has been my greatest resource. I carry a disk around with me when I go anywhere. It's got over 30,000 documents, photographs, information on the topics that I'm thinking. So I make myself informed. I don't just create an opinion about because somebody said so. I'm interested or I believe it's worthy, I go and research it.
Mm. So you talked about earlier we were chatting and you mentioned your work with the School of Elders.
Group of elders at the Wesley Mission.
Wow, that's a fascinating concept. What do they do there? What do you do there?
Well, I met the person by accident who runs it.
Right.
And she said, what can you do for me? When through the discussion, I said, I suppose I could run a course for you.
Hmm.
And so I came up with a name. I've changed it a bit and I use different words. I called it Discussing the Elephant in the Room. And I had a whole range of topics.
Hmm.
I changed it recently to just narrow the topics, but still cover the same width of it because I think it was overpowering with so many topics.
Right.
To out of the box discussions.
Right.
So I just created, and I like talking to people.
Yeah.
So I meet people in little different ways, and they like to come and talk to me. Often, I'm there early, and somebody will just sit down with me and want to know. They may not come to the class, but they just want to know and hear.
Yeah.
And I'm here to share.
And who's this aimed for? Who are you having conversations with?
These are mature age people who are lonely, who need socialization, and the mission is actually getting it to them.
Yeah.
And the nice part for me, I suppose, is I don't earn any money, so I'm not accountable to do things as such. It's all voluntary, but people pay to hear me, and that goes into the missions coffers to help them do more programs.
Wow.
If I do it, and there are people in my own grouping who do it, they charge for it. No, if I have to charge for it, I'm going to have to deal with all the difficulties of people. You can charge for it as long as you make some money on it, but don't give it to them for nothing. Is my thing, because anything that people see is for nothing don't necessarily they respect it.
Right. I'm just wondering, what do you think? So reaching out, like supporting others and elders, like people are lonely, and this is a form of connection. Of course, we're talking about connected seniors. What do you think conversation and signing up and having conversations? What do you think the power of that is?
The power is giving somebody a voice, giving them an opportunity to talk about their troubles in a confidential manner, being able to get some advice how to deal with the issues that worry them, the fear of abandonment, the fear of death. What do they have to get to do? How do they talk to their family and friends about their wishes, their dying wishes? What are the things they need to do? They are very appreciative because most of them have heard things, but they don't know how to sew it together like a piece of cloth. And they get confused. And of course, as you get older, the harder it is to jumble all this thing into a logical order. Fortunately, I still have those faculties.
Yeah, that's handy. I'm fascinated by the people you mentioned, conversations around death and lived experience and stuff, and creating a space. What's the essential components of that space?
The components of that space is the trust, the knowledge, and that they think. I'll relay you an incident that happened a few weeks ago. And we were talking about, because the laws are coming in New South Wales on coercive control.
Yeah.
So I brought that up as a discussion.
Right.
We chatted about it. And 3/4 of the way through, there was this mature lady. She's nearly 90 years old. And she said, you know what? I've just realized I lived my life with my late husband. He had coercive control over me.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, probably true, right?
because most people don't actually understand the lingos that come up, the language.
Yeah.
What do the words mean? Now, I can't spell for nothing. Believe me, if you look at my files, but I have always been very attuned to what a word means. Are people using it in the correct context? So every day I get words coming through on my emails, and 9 times out of 10 I know them. Occasionally I don't, and occasionally I don't want to look at them.
Yeah. It's interesting. In modern terms, Language is being weaponized more than it ever has, right? So
horribly.
So part of the components you were telling me that, in one of your statements, you mentioned the safe space to talk. How important is it now to create those safe places?
Very important, because until you can get the person to accept the situation they find themselves in, to have a plan of how to deal with it so that they don't feel vulnerable or any more abandoned, because those are the fears that most mature people have. The fear of being judged, being abandoned, or being held ransom. So I address their real fears.
And of course, you mentioned abandon, right? That sense now that the older generation are a burden. They're not productive anymore or effective, or the sense that they have nothing more to offer. That's a real problem in community. How do you see that in your connections and creating spaces for these people to share their challenges?
I find it personally challenging. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because retirement is not nice. Your friends are no longer, they're dying off. You have to move away because of financial reasons or family reasons. Everything in your life's changing and you're not equipped for it. Now, men in particular find it very, very lonely because we don't know how to reconnect with other people. We don't know how people will help you. Where do you do it? And having the courage to do it. Yeah, it's very daunting. And for me, it's even more daunting because the moment I personally lose my ability to have my freedom in that sense is the day I don't live any longer, because it's like living in God's waiting room, waiting for your number to be called otherwise.
Yeah.
And that makes me able to understand when I'm dealing with people, say, with suicidal ideation, with family matters. I see it from their eyes, not from my eyes, their eyes. How do we get you to at least be able to deal with it and live with it somehow? What are your wishes?
Wow. So when faced with those big concerns, what is your response? How do you engage people in and give them the support or the walk with them? I know you've mentioned walking with them. How do you walk with them so that they choose to continue to strive and live?
I just be honest. I just am with them.
Yeah.
I've learned not to talk until they have talked to me. So I don't make presumptions and I listen. I empathize with them. I don't sympathize with them, because there's a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
So I walk with them means I listen, I hear, and only when you allow me to talk or ask me to talk, do I talk. I let them talk it through, because part of the talk is the therapy of putting it out of your system, getting it out of you so that you can cope with it. Because most of us have movies in our heads and it keeps changing.
Yeah.
And after a while, you actually don't know what is fact or fable.
Yeah.
And one of the first exercises I do with people is I say, please take everything you know of your life's journey and put it in writing, whether it's writing physically, digitally, like you're recording, put it out there, and then take the helicopter view of it and start, because only once you can reconnect to who you believe you are, can you move forward and deal with the issues. Getting it out there helps you to start that journey. It may take you quite a while. I've done all that, and nobody told me. I just started doing it. Well, journaling, I've discovered.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, there must be a book in that somewhere. It's great advice, that whole narrative of our lives, which we get trapped into sharing sometimes without, realizing that we have the power to edit all the bad bits out, right? Once we've lived them, we don't need to go over them again. So
one of the essential parts of your journaling your life is never to hand that document with all the bad stuff or make it available, because it is only going to give you. It's about you getting it out of you, getting it out of your system, acknowledging it. But I've got to say to you, because other people invade your privacy. And I know that from very personal. and being the type of person I used to leave my notes lying around because that was the way I messaged them.
Right. Somebody
And
reading your diary again, right? So,
yes, or opening your computer and reading your emails,
right. Yeah.
or checking where your phone is and where you've been. No, it's not. That is a very unhealthy situation.
And so many relationships struggle, with that level of trust, don't they? So,
Yeah, absolutely they do.
so a tough question because you talked about the real conversations you're creating a space to have, and of course for older Australians, all of us are talking and maybe thinking, maybe not talking, or maybe worried about our own mortality. So you mentioned having conversations, real conversations about death and dying. How does that play out?
Look, I don't fear death personally. I don't know what is after death. We all have tales and stories told to us by various people,
Mm,
cults, religions.
mm,
I don't have a fear of dying. I don't have a fear that if there is a maker, I've got to meet the maker and make atonement because I'm comfortable. I'm not necessarily happy, but I'm comfortable.
mm,
We don't know when death is going to happen. It's one of the givens in this world. You are going to die. Just when, where, and how
mm.
is to be seen. And that is giving people the feeling that they are being heard, that they are prepared, that they have acknowledged what their wishes are, and getting people to respect them. Whether they agree with them or not is irrelevant.
Yeah, yeah,
It's respect and making them comfortable that, yeah, it's going to happen. Death occurs at the most disadvantageous time in people's lives.
yeah. And like the great Australian Patricia King often talks about living for a day or dying for a decade, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you think having those conversations help older Australians improve the quality of their life?
It's called acceptance. There's a theory called acceptance theory.
Yeah,
We won't go into the theory, but it's people accepting where they are at, the situation of that, and knowing what pathways they can choose if they want to try to improve their current situation. A lot of people just stay in the current because that's where they're comfortable, even if it's terrible.
yeah,
It's because they've chosen for whatever reason. It's giving them the power to think, the power to choose, and the right to do it.
mm, mm, mm,
And it's all about empowerment.
yeah,
You know, I grew up in the age when you went to all these seminars and you had the rah-rah and everything else. Everybody's going to empower. Everybody had a system. And I very quickly found out, yeah, they've got systems and they charge you thousands of dollars to buy their system and they don't work. They
yeah,
don't work simply because they're not your system. They're
yeah,
not your belief system. It's
yeah,
the guy that's selling it to you.
yeah,
Very few actually accomplish anything with these seminars to go to. Hopefully, they make them feel better. I went there to learn how these people worked,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
how they work the fool. And it's amazing what people do.
Mm.
Empowering people to be in control of themselves. And if you go back to Viktor Frankl, that was how he managed to survive Auschwitz concentration camp. And that's where he wrote his book, The Meaning to Life. A Japanese concept similar to his, it's called Ikigai. I can't pronounce it properly.
Ikigai, yeah, yeah,
Ikigai, that's it.
yeah.
Very, very similar philosophy. And it's understanding these things and choosing which bits resonate with you as worthwhile. Not you have to do it all. No, you take what resonates with you.
Yeah, I was very much inspired by Ikigai and Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Viktor Frankl's quote from Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response is a space, and that space,
Yeah.
a choice can be made, and in that choice, you can find freedom and growth. I love, I've embraced that now more as I got older than I ever did when I was young. So, what is it
Yeah.
about reaching a certain age and being and then choosing to grow from that point. It seems like a bit of a waste of time, a bit of Benjamin Button. Maybe we should have done it at the start.
Look, we should have done it at the start. You're right. The problem is none of us do because we're too busy trying to support the lifestyle we choose to live. We get to the mature end of our life, and what we have is a lot of lived experience and regret. And it depends on, do I take the opportunity to look at it in a positive light, or do I take it in an attitude of the victim? I've been hurt and I've been done hard by. We were definitely the only species on this earth who has been given the ability to choose. Animals don't have an ability to choose. Humans have the ability to choose, and they can do either the right way or the wrong way. That's about as the best of my religious convictions.
Right. So speaking of convictions, right, you've been on a fascinating journey as an adult, and it's had pain and challenge, personal pain and social pain. What do you when we get to this stage, what's the good thing about being here right now?
For me, it's only about giving back to other people and standing with them.
Yeah.
Because if that goes, I have nothing to live for. I don't want to sit in a chair all day and do nothing or watch the goggle box. Yeah, I'm quite happy to watch certain things, but it's not the stimulation. Being able to do something and use your life's experience to the betterment of mankind, that's important.
So service is life now for you?
Yeah, it's just a life. I volunteer for certain organizations and I'm on call.
Right.
If you need me, I'm there. There's certain organizations I have because I don't now agree with their philosophy or that their seniority follows out their philosophies. But I give to others. So I just want to do things, and it keeps me occupied and it keeps me mentally agile as I work through it. I'm a solution person. I don't create problems. I find solutions.
And what would you like? You have opportunities. You bring people into a room. You create a safe space for them to talk, and they share their conversation. What do you think inspires people to keep growing at this? Even as an older Australian.
Encouragement from your family and friends that you are worthy and that what you have lived is valuable to all. The problem is getting others to acknowledge you. That could be significant others. It could be others in terms of friendship or corporate or business life or academic life, and your family. Not shouting you down or shutting you up. Being, hey, that's great. The thought that you could pass on a segment of just something good to somebody that in later life they wake up and said, you know what, granddad actually said that to me. Man, he was clever. That they are, you may not be there any longer, but they've taken it on board because they didn't judge you or criticize you when you were passing on the information. Being heard. That's all human beings want to be done, is being heard. And it's difficult in today's society, in particularly the noisy social media side, in the busy lifestyles that we have challenged ourselves to be in. Having a meaningful conversation around a table doesn't really exist. I grew up every night we had dinner together, not each one coming to get their TV tray and go sitting. We sat around the table. Things were talked about. Not only were things talked about, but dad's business was discussed at the table. And rightfully, we knew that we were trusted to be allowed that information of knowledge. And we knew that we weren't to pass it on to our friends or their families, what we knew. Because, industrial espionage has been around since forever.
So, and that's interesting that the opportunities you describe are all sort of psychosocial, right?
Yeah.
But like there are physical and systemic barriers to older people that they're having to overcome. There's housing and finance and health
Living
care and So what what's the best approach? What are the challenges that older Australians are facing, and that and how do we sort of help all of us get through that?
Become involved to the best of your ability, capability, and willingness. To sit detached doesn't help. To sit and complain as the victim doesn't help. You need to be proactive, even if it's just a little thing. And don't judge somebody else. You haven't walked in their shoes. Sympathetic? No. Be empathetic? Yes. In other words, you've just got to be there in the moment, because you can't necessarily do anything. You can't necessarily fix everything. And there are some wonderful people out there who do everyday volunteering and helping. And the one thing I can tell you is you feel much better in yourself when you've given than when you have taken.
Yeah.
You're grateful when you've taken, but giving is much better than taking.
I think that's a strong place to move forward. And talking of moving forward, personally, Walter, what are you looking forward to in the future as we all get a bit older?
Well, that is the million-dollar question. I actually don't know. All I know is I don't want it to be worse than what it is now.
Right.
That's I do know. But, we all have dreams. We all have aspirations. We all want to be loved and be held and all these sort of things. Are you making yourself available? Now, that is a big challenge, to make yourself available to the opportunities or the giving. And because of our lived experience and the things that we've experienced, sometimes it holds us back.
So making ourselves available, there's a great theme to end on, right? And it's wonderful advice. And it's been really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, being so open and vulnerable, and sharing something of your story, and also sharing something of your wisdom. I really appreciate that, Walter. It's been fabulous to chat.
Thanks, John. It was nice doing it.
Yeah, well, and have a lovely overseas holiday. And I hope you're
Well, I'm on the email.
I hope your surprise worked wonderfully well.
It's done it before, so hopefully she doesn't smell a rat, my sister, at this stage. She could do it. She knows I'm very impromptu. I just decide in a moment's notice I'm going to do something.
So it sounds amazing. So safe travels, and
thank you,
Walter.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Connecting Seniors, a Kintsugi Heroes special series. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.